The entire movement behind the constant attacks on what players want has pretty much just been dissolved into nothingness over the past week, and to say these activist types are not happy would be doing the entire situation a massive disservice. But as we can see from the games that keep winning this year and selling like hotcakes, what the media wants people to like versus what they actually do couldn't be any more different. So let's talk about this mass layoff nonsense and even about how Oblivion, cause it'll fit into this too and you'll see what I mean. Firstly, as this article states, Vox Media has officially sold off gaming website Polygon and pretty much laid off most of its staff. So what happened is CEO of Vox Media, Jim Bankov, confirmed that they would be transitioning some but not all of Polygon's staff to join Valnet. If you don't know what that is, as seen here, Valnet is a big collection of websites all under one umbrella that is owned by the same people. And as you can also see from this slide on screen showing all the websites they own, Valnet's core websites include stuff like Game Rant, Screen Rant, Collider, Give Me Sport, The Gamer, Fextra Life for God's sakes, I didn't even know they owned that one, and even stuff like comicbookresources.com too. So these people own a lot of the modern day gaming news and entertainment websites that are readily available today pretty much. And like I said, Polygon has been pretty much deconstructed and torn apart by this new deal, and the easiest way to look at it is just like this. Think of Polygon if they were a house. They're tearing it apart for the wood and the tiles within it to build something new. But Polygon won't technically be what it was anymore, and a lot of people who worked there are now laid off, which marks another sight of games journalists being kicked to the curb yet again. The CEO that did all of this, that Jim guy, said this, which is now on screen, how they want to strengthen their portfolio. And blah blah blah, you know, the usual corporate stuff these types usually say, but what they're really saying is that their approach to gaming news media has not worked, obviously, and because of that, they're now gutting a whole website. They're not alone, however, since Giant Bomb, that's another website cut from the same cloth as Polygon, is also getting completely dismembered for parts as well, as confirmed here by Kotaku of all places, which I wager will also be dying in the foreseeable future too, probably. They confirmed that Giant Bomb has, well, pun intended, imploded pretty much. As confirmed here, the Giant Bomb podcast, which was really one of the only reasons anyone cared about the site to begin with, would be officially losing its host. And by care, I mean the only reason this podcast had any real relevancy was because they would leak industry games before they got announced for clicks. And Jeff Grubb, who hates people like me and people I'm friendly with, has confirmed that he is now currently jobless. He said this via Blue Sky, the leftist hellhole of a Twitter alternative, where he would say this: "Well, that was a dream come true, knew it wouldn't last though, out of a job at the moment, but I'll always be doing," and then he links his Patreon, but as they say in the biz, never assume that it can never happen to you. And the reality is that what has happened to both Polygon and Giant Bomb here doesn't really surprise me considering the trajectory of where this industry has been going. Look, I started YouTube in early 2021, didn't really find my voice until around 2022, and since then I've faced censorship and harassment for standing up for games and more. And back then, what I was fighting for was constantly being attacked and ridiculed and laughed at by places like Polygon, Giant Bomb, Kotaku, and all the other ones. These places all wrote hit pieces, either attacking me or other YouTuber types for daring to stand up for players. It really hit a fever pitch in 2023 and 2024 especially, when Gamergate 2 exploded after the whole Cabrutus Sweet Baby thing last year. And then these types, specifically Jeff Grubb of Giant Bomb and his cohorts that are all like him, they all really believed that they would come out on top in the end by planting their feet in the sand by attacking the very viewers who watched and supported them. And as we can now see in real time, a lot of these people and their friends are now jobless, and some of them have even resorted to becoming waitresses to make ends meet following their implosion and fall from grace. Ooh boy. And this is why what I've been saying for the last 2 years, at least on this channel, is that you have to respect your audience. I made a video a long time ago that got a lot of flack, especially on Twitter, about cyberpunk edge runners. Here's that video on screen here, where I literally say in the thumbnail, "Stop attacking your audience." And the nuclear backlash I got on Twitter about this showed how skewed the public perception was back then, because many people had grown to accept that gaming news media, or video games in general, was just going to be like this for the rest of time, pretty much. There was no point in fighting it. They had won, their kind was too entrenched in the depths already, they had their roots down, and it was going to be next to impossible to pull these so-called weeds out. And then 2024 happened, and to say the obliteration of all of this was glorious, yeah, that would be an understatement. Hit piece after hit piece from former Kotaku writers who got laid off for anti-Semitism, by the way, would try to hurt the credibility of YouTubers. But yet, despite their best efforts to try to sway public opinion back into their lane, none of it really worked. At this point, the propaganda had stagnated, and the worst possible scenario had become to begin what I could only call the new meta, or new normal, which was that people's eyes were opened finally. And for the first time in a really long time, the journalists tasked with connecting to readers had completely lost that connection. Yet, it was nobody but their own faults, of course, and the rest, they say, is history. But this is what happens, and now you got places like Polygon that's being sold off to a soulless content farm, and Giant Bomb's getting gutted like an NPC in GTA pretty much. And places like Polygon used to be the gaming site that went from we're gonna revolutionize gaming journalism to we're gonna lecture you about why your favorite game is now problematic. Now that they've been sold off to Valnet, who, let's say it just how it is, they are pretty much the kings of SEO slop. SEO, by the way, means search engine optimization. Basically, they specialize in making content that hits the latest trends and ensures people's feeds and algorithms get traffic to their websites pretty much all of the time. And among the mass layoffs that hit Polygon, it also included the co-founder Chris Plant and senior writer Michael McWhirter. Yeah, fellas, it was brutal, and senior reporter Nicole Carpenter was even out here publishing an Epic versus Apple story at 10 a.m., only to then get the boot 2 hours later. That's crazy, dude. But look, I'm not dancing on anyone's graves, well, maybe a little bit, but anyways, layoffs suck, I know, but let's be real, okay? Polygon's been alienating gamers for years with sanctimonious takes and agenda-driven articles that feel like they were written by a Reddit mod with a personal vendetta who just couldn't help tipping their fedora every 3 seconds. People didn't want to be preached at, they wanted reviews and previews and news that, you know, respected their intelligence. And here's the kicker, Valnet's business model is instead churning out clickbait like top 10 reasons your dog hates your PS5 or whatever instead. Polygon's pretty much gonna be going from preachy to straight up soulless with this going forward. Website Aftermath nailed it when they had their article titled Polygon and Giant Bomb are being sacrificed at the altar of slop. It's all interchangeable to them, it's all the same slop, and I have no doubt that the usual types will probably open up their own independent publications at some point. Will they be successful? I don't know. But the reality is that once was is clearly no longer, and while they wanted people like me to fail at any given chance they could find, it was them who lost instead. So the big takeaway here is that Polygon's sale is a symptom of a much bigger problem, which is that gaming journalism is bleeding out because it forgot who it's supposed to serve, and instead decided it would only serve other gaming journalists' opinions instead. It's like if a chef making meals only to impress the rival restaurant across the street's executive chef instead, while all these customers that are sitting inside of the restaurant look confused and hungry. It makes no sense. They had their own heads so far up their own asses they forgot why they were doing this in the first place. And while Polygon's busy becoming a content farm pretty much, Giant Bomb's going through its own self-apocalypse, because their owners, which is Fandom Inc., announced a strategic reset and realignment as seen here in this VG Charts article. The translation, they're gutting the place and live streaming's been temporarily paused. Yeah, temporarily paused. Dude, that's like saying my goldfish is temporarily deceased. And Fandom's new guidelines, they're basically turning it into a sterile wiki farm. Well, that's what happens when you attack your fans, I guess. Kotaku reported clashes with Fandom's vision, and let's just say it how it is. It's not looking good. Oh, and the timing, it's a chef's kiss. Polygon and Giant Bomb, two pillars of games media, both imploding on the same day. You even had Paste Magazine call it one of the final death knells for gaming journalism as seen here, and you know what? They're not wrong. Giant Bomb was special because it was authentic. Guys like Ryan Davis, God rest his soul, made you feel like you were hanging out with your gamer buddies. Now, it's just another cog in Fandom's soulless machine, and people took notice. So Polygon slop now, Giant Bomb's toast. What's a person to do? Well, let's talk about what we actually want. For example, Oblivion Remastered is already beloved and wasn't even released at full price and comes feature complete if you ask me. And it's what players wanted. A classic game polished to perfection with no political baggage. Well, besides the body type stuff, which we know for sure was 100% added in this remaster because Bethesda Bethesda's HR department is overrun with Karens, but besides that one blemish, the rest is totally fine. But in terms of the actual game story world and such, there's no lectures, no agendas, just you holding a sword and a world to explore. And the best part, it's nostalgic without being a cash grab. It's not trying to sell you a manifesto, it's just fun, and that's really nice to see. Because people are tired of games that feel like propaganda. We don't need developers preaching about diversity or sustainability in our escapist fantasies. We want Oblivion, a game that respects our intelligence and lets us make our own choices, and the community's eating it up. Meanwhile, if sites like Polygon were still operating like nothing happened, they would probably write a 5,000-word think piece about how Oblivion's Horse Armor DLC was problematic capitalism, or that the existence of white Imperials or Nords in Cyrodiil is not reflective of modern-day real-world demographics. And that's why they're dying, and games like this are thriving instead. But here's the dark cloud on the horizon. Games are getting too damn expensive. AAA titles are hitting $70, $80, even $100 with deluxe editions. And that's even before the whole microtransaction stuff. And it's not just the price, it's also the budgets. Modern blockbusters cost $200, $300 million to make it. When they flop, studios crash and burn. Look at Starfield. Bethesda spent a fortune and it was fine, not great, not terrible, just fine. It didn't even win any awards that mattered. And when you compare that to Oblivion Remastered, which took an old gem, polished it, and dropped it at a reasonable price, or free on Game Pass, I guess, and look at that, it's made its budget back in some already. You see, remasters, indies, and mid-budget games are instead proving that you don't need a Hollywood-level budget to make something that's amazing. Oblivion was made by a fraction of the team of, say, Starfield or even Concord, yet it's not only larger, but far more interesting too. Well, I guess it's not bigger than Starfield, I guess if you compare, all of the space, like the endless space within it with nothing to do in it, but if you ask me, I don't really consider that to be worthwhile gameplay, but to each their own, I guess. But let's just say it how it is. Bloated budgets lead to safe, soulless games. Studios can't take risks because they're terrified of, losing $300 million by pivoting into something new and fresh. And that's why we keep getting cookie-cutter sequels and battle passes instead of bold, creative titles. And when those games fail, guess who pays? Well, it's us, basically, through the layoffs and the studio closures, and then even higher prices for products. You'd think the answer would be to make smaller, more affordable games instead of nickel and diming each player even more, but I guess not. You ask me, the path forward is pretty simple. Make good games, price them fairly, and I don't know, respect your audience maybe. Because Oblivion Remastered is proof that it works. Stop betting the farm on overhyped blockbusters. And maybe we'll get more games that aren't just slop, and if those gaming journalists treated people like they were humans and not just ants that are beneath their boot, they would probably still exist and be gainfully employed too. Then there was this one article from that Park Place which is titled "Oblivion's Remastered Shocks Gaming Industry and Clearly Shows Modern Message Tropes in Video Games Doesn't Work." In the article they talk about the body type nonsense, which is yes dumb, but I've covered that already in other videos. But it was this paragraph that I resonated with, which reads as follows: "The success of Oblivion Remastered highlights a broader industry trend. Players are increasingly favoring updated versions of older games over new releases. Again, reports indicate that a significant portion of gaming time is spent on titles that are several years old, with only a small percentage dedicated to games released within the past year. I would posit that not only are the ideologies of today's studios out of line with the vast marketplace, but also the hiring practices of major gaming companies in the last decade have likely decreased the capabilities such that many companies simply can't compete with their own legacy games made by far superior, merit-based teams from a generation prior." And that's really true, because again, for the most part, a lot of modern studios, especially Western ones, can't seem to outdo their previous games, despite the fact that they have more money now, more resources, way better technology, as well as all of the animations and assets from those previous far superior games technically available to them to use whenever they want. Yet despite all of this, newer games usually don't outdo their previous games in a studio's collection. Why is that? It's as that Park Place stated. If you look at Oblivion, which was released in 2006, and then compare it to, say, Starfield, it's night and day in terms of quality, replay value, and pretty much everything else. And again, Oblivion was made by a far smaller, and as Park Place put it, a more competent, merit-based team instead. But if you bring that up, you're a bigot, because they will then spin it and say you're just saying those older games are better because mostly only men worked on them and not women or whatever else. And to that I say, look, call me a bigot all you want, but the proof, as they say, is in the pudding. It's very obvious that when Oblivion got remastered and made more beautiful, it felt less like a remaster announcement, and honestly, it more so was just like a big, massive AAA release that came out of nowhere. And like I said, people are loving it. A lot of people who never played Oblivion are playing it for the first time right now. That means they pretty much just got a modern remaster of a feature-complete game dumped on their laps out of nowhere. And it's now showing these people who've played nothing but modern slop just how good we used to have it before. And it's not just Oblivion doing that, it was journalism back in the day too. I used to love reading Kotaku when I was in high school. I graduated, by the way, in 2010. God, I'm old. And this was before any Gamergate stuff existed and the industry wasn't overrun by activists yet. I remember reading the Snack-taku reviews and seeing cool previews on Kotaku about fun upcoming games or quirky opinion pieces. But then journalism, like modern gaming, took a nosedive and decided it no longer wanted to cater to what really mattered. And it wasn't just the websites that got bad, the games did too. Look at Rocksteady, for example, and then go compare Suicide Squad to Batman Arkham Knight. You really can't. Sure, they were both made by the same studio, I guess, but the actual people within those studios clearly changed and people left between games. It's why, like I've said in previous videos from a year ago, it's the ship of Theseus theory over and over, proving to be right again and again. That these studio names or these websites' domains matter little if the people who made these places special are no longer there anymore. Why do you think Starfield is not as good as Oblivion or wasn't as received as well? The staff changed dramatically over the years, obviously. There's a reason why a lot of what comes out these days is not as good as they used to be, and I can even prove it more with a recent example. Look at Clair Obscur, great game. I'm like 70 hours into it on New Game Plus in the endgame myself, level 93, and enjoying my time with it. The game was made by a new studio, that's Sandfall Interactive, which is also made up of primarily ex-Ubisoft developers. And this is what I mean. A game like Clair Obscur couldn't exist at Ubisoft. Maybe it could back in the early 2000s when Ubisoft was more so a pioneer of the industry that made actual real art, but it's clear since then that Ubisoft has become like the owners who collect these websites like Infinity Stones. They're basically just slop farms, instead making stuff bigger and longer, not to be better, but to waste your time and fill their spreadsheets to impress investors. Yet Clair Obscur and Oblivion have a lot in common. Not only are they both objectively great games, their team sizes are small too. Oblivion, from what I could find online, was made by, get this, 70 people. That's 70 guys. 70 people. And Skyrim was made by a development team of around 100 people back in 2011, which by standards then, that was huge. How big was Starfield's development team, you may be asking? It's about 500 or so people who made that game. And that also includes multiple full studios like Bethesda Game Studios, Bethesda Dallas, Austin, and Montreal teams too. That's well over 5 times the dev size that made Starfield compared to Oblivion, yet which game is more beloved? We know the answer. Go look at Assassin's Creed Shadows. I mean, we don't have the exact numbers on dev size, but Ubisoft has confirmed that that game was made by multiple studios, including massive amounts of outsourcings on the project. However, as seen here, Shadows credits, if you watch it in full, it takes 2 whole hours to watch every single name included that made that game. And like I said, Clair Obscur was made by ex-Ubisoft devs. The game has universal acclaim and like a 9.7 out of 10 on Metacritic from a user score. It's apparently like the highest user score of all time, and its dev size, it's somewhere between 30 to 50 people, give or take. Either way, the fact that a game like that was made by basically a fraction of the people it took to make Shadows, that speaks volumes. And yet, as someone who platinum Shadows and is close to platinum in Clair Obscur, I've put about the same amount of time into both games, and I can tell you that Clair Obscur is by far the more interesting and memorable game. And the same can be said about gaming websites. It's not the amount of journalists you have or how many identify a certain way that makes them suddenly somehow better at their jobs. No, it comes down to the quality of the people that determines how well the work is received. And like studios with bloated dev sizes, these websites are spilling and keeling over and removing the bloat too, because clearly they're not justifying the reasoning for these websites or places to exist the way that they are now, because quality will always be quantity. If you ask me, I think the fact that every AAA game pretty much now has to be some, I don't know, 500 to 1,000 dev size studios spending like $300 or $400 billion, and they all need absurd returns on investments to break even, is just not going to work. The industry needed this calling because there was just too much fat that was weighing it all down, and frankly, if these journalists want to do better, they can, but the answer is, will they want to, which I seriously doubt it, because they're too far up their own asses to smell the roses at this point. In the same way, these AAA studios are so locked into their ways, they can't hope to break free and try anything new. The entire, for lack of a better word, woke movement may have wanted us, the players, to fail in our uprising, but it didn't really work for them clearly, and now the culling has begun. And if you ask me, like that ship of Theseus theory I bring up every now and then, it just keeps proving true that these websites and studios are not their names but their people, and frankly, the people making games or writing these articles now seem to be nowhere near the caliber of what has came before. There's sprinkles of brilliance, sure, but you'll find no sympathy from me when another institution inevitably falls apart, which has for years wished nothing but the worst for someone like me and others. If only these websites and studios kept making good things, and instead threw away all the noise and nonsense, maybe we wouldn't be in this position, but due to the hubris of those who believe they can never fail, here we stand now. But there you have it, folks. Polygon's been sold to the slop lords, Giant Bomb's on its last legs, and people are begging for games like Oblivion Remastered. Fun, agenda-free, well besides the body type stuff, and not priced like a luxury car. The gaming industries is clearly at a crossroads, and it's up to us to demand better going forward. So support indie devs, or just devs in general that actually don't hate you, call out all the bad practices, and for the love of God and Tamriel, stop pre-ordering $100 deluxe editions or whatever Nintendo and Microsoft want to push as a status quo going forward. Gaming journalism might be dying, but gaming itself, it's honestly stronger than ever because of you, the players. So, what do you think? Are Polygon and Giant Bomb just done for? Is Oblivion Remastered the gold standard going forward, and how much is too much for a video game? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, subscribe, have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.